discussing about the topic aortic dissection. I'll be discussing this topic under following headings. Acute aortic dissection is the most common catastrophic event affecting the aorta. Without treatment, majority of the patient with aortic dissections will die within 3 months of presentation. The mortality of acute dissection, if left untreated, will exceed 22% within 6 hours and 50% within 24 hours and 68% within first week of presentation. Death usually due to acute dissection of ascending aorta is due to aortic rupture into the pericardium and acute aortic regurgitation or coronary osteocompromise. Whereas in case of descending aortic dissection, more likely die from the end organ compromise. So coming to classification, they're classified depending on the according to the anatomical location of the entry tier, or depending on the time between the onset of symptoms and the patient presentation. Temporal classification, it considers the time of onset. They are subdivided into acute, subacute, and chronic phase. In acute phase, we call it as acute if the symptom onset and presentations are within first 2 weeks. The mortality is very high, which is about 74%. In case of subacute, the presentation and symptom onset within 2 weeks to 90 days. And in this period, the risk of death decreases, but the dissection flap remains pliable. And this is the ideal time to consider for performing elective TEVAR for coverage of the proximal entry tier. Finally, the chronic phase, which is considered after 90 days from the symptom onset. In this phase, the flap becomes stiff and fibrotic, and aorta begins to remodel positively or negatively. Another classification we have, anatomical classification. There are two schemes. It considers the location of entry tier and the extent of aortic involvement in the dissection. The original DBK classification proposed in 1965, it considers both the origin of the entry tier and the extent of dissection. Here we have three types, and type 3 is divided into subdivided into type 3A and 3B. In type 1 DBK, the dissection originates in the ascending aorta and extends to the abdominal aorta up to abdominal aorta. In type 2, it originates in the ascending aorta and limited to the ascending aorta itself. And type 3A, it originates in the descending aorta and limited to the descending aorta. In 3B, it starts in the descending aorta, distal to the left subclavian artery, and ends in extends up to the abdominal aorta. We have one more classification, Stanford classification, which was a simplified anatomical classification. According, it considers only origin of entry tier. So Stanford type A dissection originates in the ascending aorta. So it includes so DBK type 1 and type 2 are included in Stanford type A, whereas Stanford type B dissection originates in the descending aorta distal to the origin of left subclavian artery. So type 3 DBK is included here. Because the origin of entry tier is the key predictor of early outcomes, most patients are now stratified into Stanford type A or type B. So we have one more classification system. This one is not followed everywhere. Dissect classification. It's a new mnemonic based approach to categorization of the aortic dissection. This is basically used for the clinical assessment and the management of the plan. Here the mnemonic, it's a dissect. D for duration of the disease, intimal tier location. Duration of the disease again subdivided into acute, subacute, chronic. Intimal tier location depending on the ascending aorta arch or descending aorta or abdominal aorta. The size of the dissected aorta, here they consider the maximum diameter of the true lumen. and the segmental extent, and from originate in the segmental extent they consider the origin of the entry or the origin of the tear and the extension up to what level. So they have graded accordingly in accordingly. And the clinical complications of the dissection, again they have subdivided into complicated and uncomplicated. In complicated type, they have like a rupture, persistent pain, hypertension, uncontrolled hypertension, and finally thrombus within the aortic false lumen. Like in aortic false lumen thrombosis, again subdivided into partially thrombose or completely thrombose or no thrombosis. Coming to epidemiology, the incidence of aortic dissection ranges from 2.9 to 3.5 per 100,000 population per year. Some of the demographic details which were taken from the IRAD registry, that is International Registry of Aortic Dissection. Here they found that the mean age group is 62 years and the most common in males, which is about 4:1, and type A is the most common aortic dissection, most common etiology being hypertension, and they have seen pulse deficit of about 26%. Coming to risk factors for aortic dissection, I'll be discussing this under 3 headings: cardiovascular conditions, pregnancy, and cocaine abuse. Under cardiovascular conditions, this is a there is a chronobiological pattern of occurrence, most frequently in the morning hours between 6 a.m. to 12 p.m. and more often in the winter season. It is associated with aortic wall structural abnormalities, and the most common abnormality is bicuspid aortic valve, seen in 17 to 14%, with or without associated aortic root dilatation. Other aortic disease are associated with aortic dissection are coarctation of the aorta, annulo-aortic ectasia, chromosomal abnormalities, aortic arch hypoplasia, and hereditary conditions such as Marfan's and Ehlers-Danlos. Marfan syndrome accounts for 50% of the cases of acute aortic dissection in a patient less than 40 years of the age. Coming to pregnancy, it's there is a 4-fold increased risk of acute dissection and the rupture also. Preeclampsia with or without progression to the hypertension is the most common etiology of the peripartum aortic dissection. But the pregnant women with Marfan syndrome are also at high risk. The best predictor is dilatation of the aortic root more than 5 centimeter. So this is the best predictor for aortic dissection among the patients with Marfan syndrome with pregnancy. The most common site for tear is in young patient it is sinuses of Valsalva or sinotubular junction. While in a type A dissection in older patient it is they are more likely to originate higher in the ascending aorta. Coming to cocaine abuse, it is a rare cause usually seen in urban population, and typically these the cocaine abuse patient is a young male smoker with a history of hypertension. The one possible mechanism could be due to release of catecholamines, which causes triad of profound hypertension, vasoconstriction, and increased cardiac output. Thereby, this creates dramatic acute increase in ventricular contraction and a shear force on the wall of the aorta. Now the pathological anatomy of the acute aortic dissection. So there are two pathological entities. One is intimal tear and one more is cystic medial necrosis. Intimal tear, it's a dynamic process and it can occur anywhere in the aorta. Most commonly, it is seen in ascending aorta followed by descending aorta near the left subclavian artery. The pathognomic lesion is one of the intimal tear followed by blood surging either antegrade or retrograde and cleaving the intima and medial layers of the aortic wall longitudinally for a variable distance. Typically, this tear is transverse in location but not circumferential, and the intimomedial layers can be cleaved both longitudinally and circumferentially. The adventitial bond blood-filled space created between the dissection layers of the aortic wall becomes a false lumen. Fenestrations occur within the intimal flap downstreams, usually located at the site of branch vessel ostia from the aorta. The most characteristic lesion is the presence of intimal flap. The origin of intimal flap or a tear is most commonly seen in 65% ascending aorta followed by descending aorta, and arch and abdominal aorta constitutes 10% of the patients. In the descending aorta, intimal tear typically starts a few centimeters distal to the left subclavian artery, because this segment of the aorta is subjected to the highest pressure fluctuations, and the cleavage plane will progress with a distal false lumen on the left posterolateral aspect of the aorta in 80% of the patients. Thereby, the celiac SMA in the right renal arteries typically arise from the true lumen, and the left renal artery arise from the false lumen. However, the variations of this pattern can occur. Another pathological entity we have come across is cystic medial necrosis. There is a medial degeneration of the aortic wall that diminishes the structural integrity of aortic layers. The central lesion appears to be deterioration of the collagen lesion, medial collagen in the elastin fibers through elastoclysis. This is considered to be a factor in most of the aortic dissection. It is an essential feature of several hereditary conditions such as Ehlers-Danlos syndrome and Marfan syndrome. The specific connective tissue account for only 10 to 15% of all acute dissections. But even in a normal individuals in which dissection occurs, the degree of medial degeneration still tends to be greater than the expected as a normal part of as a part of normal aging. The exact cause of medial degeneration remains unclear, but advanced age and hypertension appears to be the most important factors for the development of cystic medial degeneration. Coming to malperfusion syndromes, I'll be discussing here the pathogenesis and the treatment aspect later. It's by definition, it is an end organ ischemia secondary to the aortic branch compromise from dissecting process. Incidence is about 31% and can involve one or more vascular beds simultaneously. Before considering mechanisms, one should consider the anatomical and physiological variables. They are like percentage of the aortic circumference dissected in case of malperfusion, and the presence of distal re-entry focus between the true and false lumen, and the topography of the branch ostia to the true versus false lumen. Within a minute after aortic dissection is initiated, the true lumen collapses to variable degree and the false lumen expands. The adventitious bond outer wall of the false lumen must expand to larger diameter in order to accommodate the same wall tension at a given blood pressure, according to Laplace law. So in contrast, the true lumen, which contains majority of the elastic components, which undergoes a radial elastic collapse, the absence of the distal fenestrations, the mean false lumen pressure increases, thereby compression of, which leads to compression of true lumen. There are two possible mechanisms which explain the malperfusion. There are two, the dynamic obstruction and the static obstruction, and most common is dynamic obstruction. Here the true lumen is compressed, which is unable to provide the adequate blood flow to the branched ostium, or it may be due to the dissection flap. In the picture it is depicted the flap prolapsing into the vessel ostium, so thereby limiting the flow into the branched vessel. The severity of the true lumen collapse and the degree of aortic level ostial occlusion is determined by the following factors: the circumference of dissected aorta and cardiac output, blood pressure, heart rate, and the peripheral resistance of the outflow vessels. The pulse deficit may wax and wane over a time due to variability of the above mentioned factors. In static obstructions, a malperfusion is caused by dissecting process extending into the branch vessel proper. They were narrowing it to variable degree. In the first picture, we can see there is a compression of a false lumen, the vessel ostium branch vessel by a false lumen. In the false lumen is highly thrombogenic as a result of exposed medial layers. So there is high chance of formation of the thrombus at the blind end of branch vessel. In the second picture, we can see there is a thrombus formation. If this process enters and constricts the ostia of branch vessels, the organ injury can occur either by thrombosis or hypoperfusion of the involved vessels. This kind of the obstruction is unlikely to resolve with restoration of the aortic true lumen itself. Some kind of manipulation is required either by placement of a stent or bypass grafting. So I'll be discussing about the clinical presentation. Most common presentation symptom is a pain. The typical character of the pain is sudden onset, severe pain either in the chest, abdomen or a back. It is a character of the pain is tearing type of the pain. So chest pain is seen in when the depending on the patient complaints, we can locate the site of dissection. In case of type A dissection, chest pain is most common and followed by back pain. Abdominal pain is less common, which is seen only in 21%. In type B, back pain followed by the abdominal pain. So, but if there is abdominal pain, one should have high index of suspicion for mesenteric vascular compromise. Typically, these patients describe this kind of pain as a worst ever pain experienced by them. The control of the pain with antihypertensive is a mainstay of early management of acute aortic dissection. The recurrence of the pain implies the failure of medical therapy. One has to look into further imaging modality or other therapies. The second clinical symptom is a clinical feature is hypertension. It is seen in 70% of the type B dissection and only 25 to 30% of the type A dissection. Some patient may present with a hypotension. It is rare in a type B dissection, but common in type A. Because hypotension in ascending aorta dissection may be due to aortic valve disruption or cardiac tamponade. But some patient may have falsely depressed brachial artery pressure due to malperfusion of the brachiocephalic vessels. So if there is hypertension, usually it is refracted to medical therapy in case of type B dissection. Other clinical features are like neurological symptoms seen in 5 to 10% of the patients. This indicates the development of cardiac tamponade or involvement of the brachiocephalic vessels. The patients with the syncope have higher rate of severe complications. About half of the patient, this is not a usual cause of loss of consciousness. It may be related to other pathophysiological changes such as vasovagal events or direct stretching of the baroreceptors in the aortic wall. The other neurological manifestation is spinal cord ischemia seen in 2 to 10% of the type B dissection. It is due to interruption of the intercostal vessels. Other features are like lumbar plexopathy due to peripheral nerve compression, hoarseness of voice, and Horner syndrome. Peripheral vascular complications is seen up to 30 to 50% of the patients with aortic dissection. Most commonly, iliofemoral vessel involvement in 35 patients, followed by common carotid and left subclavian involvement and brachiocephalic trunk involvement. Patient presenting with a pulse deficits of the carotid pulse strongly correlates with the fatal stroke. Mortality is clearly linked to the number of pulse deficits at the time of presentations. Within first 24 hours, mortality is about 9.4% with no deficits and 15% with 1 or 2 pulse deficits and 35% in a patients with 3 or more pulse deficits. So how to diagnose these patients? First, in acute condition, diagnosis must be confirmed before proceeding to other things, other evaluations. Secondly, once it is confirmed, the extent of the dissection, potential involvement of the branch vessel, and the presence of immediate life-threatening complications such as a tamponade should be provided. The imaging plain radiography usually not indicated in acute and subacute cases. It is done for as a routinely for chronic cases. Some of the non-specific findings are like widening of the mediastinum and widening of cardiac or aortic silhouettes and displacement of aortic calcifications and pleural effusion. The investigation of choice for acute setting is CT angiography, which is readily available, non-invasive, and has reported a sensitivity of 83 to 95% and specificity of 85 to 98%. The chief limitation of image CT angiography is the ascending aorta, where the sensitivity may drop to less than 40%, but this is readily overcome by use of transesophageal echocardiography. The typical picture is curved orientation of flap, intimal flap in case of acute setting, and in case of chronic dissection, the dissection flap is flat in orientation. And some may present with the slit-like compressed true lumen. In such cases, there will be high chances of visceral artery malperfusion or renal artery malperfusion. This is a CT angio picture. In the first picture, we can see there is severely compressed true lumen. In the here in the second picture, we can see the origin of SMA from the true lumen, and in the third picture, we can see the right renal artery originating from the true lumen, and left renal artery originating from here false lumen in the fourth picture. So other investigation modalities are like echocardiography. Sensitivity and specificity is very less. The chief limitation is the anatomical blind spot in the distal ascending aorta and arch. It is due to the air-filled trachea in the left main bronchus. And transesophageal echocardiography overcomes this limitation of transthoracic echocardiography and has a sensitivity as high as 98% and specificity ranges from 63 to 96%. Advantages of transesophageal echocardiography include wider availability, ease of use, and bedside availability. It also possesses the ability to detect entry tear sites in the false lumen status like thrombus, flow status, and the involvement of the arch or the coronary arteries, and the degree of aortic valve regurgitation if present, and pericardial effusion also. In unstable patients with the suspected acute dissection in ascending aorta, this test may be performed in operating room to make a prior diagnosis or before going for definitive therapy. So other imaging modality is MRI. Specificity and sensitivity in the range of 95 to 100%. It can detect the entry tear and the extent of dissection and potential branch involvement, and it can differentiate both the true lumens and the false lumens. Chief limitations include the lack of immediate availability and the long examination time and the lack of monitoring for a critically ill patient, especially in acute aortic dissection. Coming to the treatment modality, I'll be discussing about the type B dissection here, treatment modalities. Type A, the main treatment is open surgery. So I'll be discussing about type B dissection here. So treatment should, once it is diagnosed, all patients should be started on a prompt antihypertensives with the prompt control of blood pressure. And early recognition of malperfusion is very important. In type B dissection, the catastrophic complication of rupture is uncommon. The open graft replacement of aortic entry tear has been shown to be inferior to the medical therapy in patients with uncomplicated type B dissection. So that is why it is not recommended. There is subset of patients who are likely to benefit from the elective TUR in case of subacute period after the symptom onset. The treatment aspect, it is divided in medical therapy, endovascular, and open surgery. First, I'll discuss about medical treatment. The goal is to reduce the hemodynamic forces that have initiated and propagated the intimal tear and the cleavage of aortic wall. This involves aggressive control of systolic blood pressure with IV antihypertensives, and all patients should be admitted in ICU settings. Intravenous, preferably like labetalol should be started. Beta blockers. And for those patients with hypotension in a setting of acute dissection, urgent evaluation for cardiac tamponade is indicated. If that is found, then percutaneous pericardiocentesis is not advised, as it often accelerates the bleeding and shock. A combination of beta blocker and vasodilator is standard medical therapy. Beta blocker should be initiated before starting any vasodilators, because vasodilators causes reflex sympathetic stimulation by release of catecholamines. All patients should have continuous blood pressure monitoring, preferably via intraarterial catheters, and monitoring of the cardiac rhythms and hemodynamic surveillance with monitoring of the input and output, urine output and input and urine output. Once the patient's blood pressure has been controlled to systolic of 100 to 120 mmHg, and if the pain is resolved, they can be switched over to oral antihypertensives. The patients are followed up with the serial surveillance imaging with the contrast CT. The first image should be taken prior to discharge from the hospital, followed by 6-monthly interval. Once the dissection flap has been stable for 2 scans, at least 2 scans, then they are followed up with yearly basis imaging. The mortality, 30-day mortality with the medical therapy of uncomplicated TB dissection is 10%. So multiple studies have shown 1-year survival of 70 to 90%. The late consequences of medical therapy is aneurysmal degeneration of the false lumen of outer wall, with a range of 15 to 40%, and the indication for intervention was aneurysmal degeneration in 66% of the patients. The average time to aneurysmal repair was 2.3 years from the initial presentation. With the long-term serial imaging, CT imaging, only 51% of the patients are free from the aortic growth at 5 years. Open surgery, coming to open surgery, we have only one indication for the open surgery in case of acute settings. So only indication for acute open graft replacement is the threatened or actual rupture at the distal intimal, at the aortic intimal tear in the proximal descending aorta, with no identifiable proximal seal zones. Unless the extensive aneurysm is present, resection should be confined to the proximal descending aorta only. Mortality is very high, range from 6 to 69%, and morbidity like spinal cord ischemia is also high, about 32%. So coming to endovascular treatment for aortic dissection, the goals of the treatment are like covering the entry tear with a stent graft, expansion of the true lumen with restoration of the flow to the visceral vessels, obliteration of the false lumen flow with the subsequent complete thrombosis, which has a potential to reduce the risk of late aneurysm degeneration. When above components are successfully achieved, aortic remodeling should occur. So what are the indications for endovascular repair of the aortic dissections? Indications like malperfusion of the vessels, branch vessels, rupture of the dissection, acute enlargement, persistent pain, uncontrolled hypertension, failure of the medical therapy. In case of asymptomatic patients, the indications are like low to moderate risk in patients where we can do TEVAR, and when there is a total aortic diameter of more than 4 cm and the false lumen diameter of more than 22 mm. If the proximal tear diameter is more than 1 cm, these are the patients are considered for TEVAR replacement. Some of the radiological indications, these are relative indications, not a definitive indications. They are like elliptical configuration of the true lumen and round configuration of the false lumen, patent false lumen, partially thrombosed false lumen, sac formation in the partially thrombosed false lumen, single entry tear, false lumen or intimal tear located in the inner curvature of the aorta. False lumen thrombosis, it is very necessary. It is, if there is a continued patency of the false lumen, it is one of the independent risk factor for aneurysmal degeneration. During first 4 to 7 hours after acute aortic dissection managed medically, degeneration is may develop in 14 to 40%. Sai et al. Show that partial thrombosis of the false lumen is a independent factor for high mortality, post-discharge mortality, which is about 31%, whereas if the false lumen is patent, the mortality is only 13%, and the complete thrombosis mortality is only 22%. So the patent false lumen will enlarge yearly by 3.3 mm in stable and uncomplicated type B dissection. So some of the technical details to be observed, to be followed in before going for the TOR are first, the exact location of the entry tier should be identified, and the proper recognition of the proximal seal zone of fixation. True lumen access should be obtained either from the brachial or femoral route. For the rapid true lumen access, it is advised to go through the right transbrachial approach. It is suggested to use intravenous ultrasound for proper true lumen identification, and it is ideal to have at least 2 centimeter of normal aorta proximal to the entry tier for the proximal seal zone. This usually requires the coverage of the origin of left subclavian artery and sealing to the level of subclavian artery. This zone is called as zone 2 of the aorta. So if the use of IOS to assess the true lumen expansion and the flap mobility after each intervention is recommended. So to avoid the retrograde aortic dissection extension, one should limit the stent oversizing to 10%, not more than that. And it is suggested to use self-expanding stents, balloon dilatation is not recommended. This is IOS picture showing true lumen compression, and the celiac originating from the true lumen here, and the SMA is also originating, and there is a intimal flap, and the false lumen is dilated. The last picture depicting showing the enlargement of the true lumen post deployment of the graft. This is the fluoroscopic image, in which here they have covered the left subclavian artery for the proper sealing of proximal zone. In the third picture, we can see there is a good dilatation of the true lumen and with adequate aortic branch vessel perfusion. This is a schematic representation of the endovascular TVAR. Coming to outcomes, the short-term results with endovascular therapy for symptomatic acute type B dissection have been promising. There are multiple prospective industry-sponsored trials. I have compared these two trials. Stable trial is an industry-sponsored trial. They have shown 30-day mortality of 5% and stroke rate of 7.5% and paraplegia of 2.5%. SVS, they have taken SVS shown that the study done among 5 centers, they found that the 30-day mortality of 10% and stroke rate of 9% and paraplegia of 9%, which is much higher than the stable trial. The long-term outcome is predicted by the stabilization of the overall aortic diameter and the expansion of the true lumen, obliteration of the false lumen. Lombardi et al. Looked at the aortic remodeling in 86 patients which were enrolled in stable trial. With the 2 years follow-up, 74% of the patients had a stable or a shrinking thoracic aortic segment around the graft area. So coming to the treatment of the malperfusions, in acute aortic dissection, the incidence is about 25 to 40% of the patient. The current indications for the aortic fenestration or the branch vessel stenting are dependent on upon the anatomical extent of dissection as determined with the CT angio. Coming to I'll be discussing about the management of malperfusion, first endovascular followed by open surgery. Endovascular, in the initial endovascular management of the patient, true and false lumen access must be obtained. Using IOS, define the relationship of the dissection flap to the visceral or renal arteries. Angiography can often be limited to hand injection only. of selected branch arteries to prove that the catheter or wire is beyond the dissection in a normal artery. One should avoid the use of power injections because power injection in the true lumen of dissected aorta may give false impression of the adequate perfusion to branch vessel, which was compromised by dynamic compression. Uh, percutaneous fenestration percutaneous fenestration in case of malperfusion. The fenestration of intimal flap may be performed by several techniques by use of IOS and fluoroscopy. Most commonly, fenestration is performed from the true lumen to the larger false lumen. This fenestration can be identified and selected with the help of IOS. If there is no natural fenestration is identified, a needle or a back end of the O14 wire can be used to create a fenestration close to the compromised aortic branch. Subsequently, the sheath is passed and balloon angioplasty of size at least 10 to 15 mm in diameter and a length of 20 to 40 mm in length is used to create a fenestration tear in the intimal flap, and stent can be placed across the fenestration to ensure the adequate blood flow on both sides of the lumen. In this picture, the access is obtained through the puncturing the intimal flap into the false lumen, and balloon dilatation done in the second picture, and in the third picture stent is placed. The results, like Patel et al. Analyzed the 69 patients with a malperfusion syndrome which were treated with endovascular fenestrations. He found that the mortality, 30-day mortality was about 17%, which is reasonable, and the long-term durability was good, with 9 of the patients requiring the aortic resection over a 72 months follow-up period. Coming to open surgical treatment of malperfusion. Since the dynamic obstruction is the most common mechanism of malperfusion, so surgical fenestration is the most commonly applied procedure. Wide resection of the dissected septum to relieve the aortic obstruction by equalizing the flow between the true and the false lumens. Here, the after aortotomy, extend the septectomy into the visceral segment and permitting the direct inspection and repair of the ostia of mesenteric and renal vessels. The duration of the supraciliac clamp should be limited to less than 20 mm. Once the aortotomy is closed, and the clamp can be shifted down below infrarenal aorta. In this picture, the aortotomy incision is depicted in the first picture, and the septum is removed. In case of dynamic obstruction, only removal of the septum is enough to decompress or to perfuse the branch site. But in case of the static obstruction, there will be extension of the dissecting process up to the vessel ostium. That is why one has to resuture, dismantle the ostium of the vessels and resuture it back to the aorta. So before closure, it is suggested to use Teflon double layer coating to strengthen the aortic wall. So depending on the body habitus, the 8th or 9th intercostal space thoracoabdominal approach is used to allow for a complete infradiaphragmatic aortic exposure. The left flank approach is suggested as all visceral arteries is easily visible in a left flank approach. At a median follow-up of 19 months, no significant aortic dilatation occurred with such aortic tailoring or a surgical as a surgical technique. Recently, the ERA registry data reported open fenestration in 9 patients with a malperfusion, and all patients survived with a successful restoration of the visceral flow. So what is the natural history and the follow-up of dissection, aortic dissection patients? Usually 25 to 40% will progress to have aneurysmal dilatation of the dissected aorta despite good medical care. Only 15% of the patients were free from the aortic growth at 5 years. Almost 30% of the patients required a re-intervention for intervention for aneurysmal degeneration of the aorta, most of which were open thoracoabdominal aneurysm repair. The factors that appear to have significant impact on the chronic aneurysm development after dissection include poorly controlled hypertension, a maximal diameter of aorta more than 4 cm in acute phase, and presence of continued patency of false lumen, and if the NTTR is more than 10 mm and a partially thrombosed false lumen. The long-term survival here in there are two trials. The INSTATE trial is a prospective randomized trial. It's a multi-center trial performed in Europe that compared the stent graft versus a medical therapy for treatment of both subacute and a chronic uncomplicated type B dissection. Here they have included 140 patients, 72 patients in the stent graft group and remaining in the medical group. The investigators found no difference in survival between two cohorts at the end of 2 years. Then they extended the study as an INSTATE Excel study. At this point, they could find the 5-year survival was superior in TWAR group. Similar to INSTATE trial, recent data from IRAD showed that there was no difference in early survival between two cohorts, but at the end of 5 years, survival was significantly higher in patients who were treated with the TWAR. One more trial we have, the ADSORB trial. The study subjects were less, only 62 patients. This trial suggests a benefit for a TWAR for aortic remodeling outcomes 1 year post dissection. What are the late therapy which may be considered like since the aneurysm that are sequelae of acute chronic dissection, these type of the aneurysm tend to be more extensive and they tend to occur more in a younger age group compared to the aneurysms of degenerative etiology. Guidelines recommend that the progressive upward titration of beta blockers should be done to achieve adequate control of the blood pressures of less than 120 by 80 mmHg in usual patients. In case of Marfan syndrome, less than 120 mmHg. It is suggested that serial imaging is a cornerstone of long-term follow-up. To summarize, the type B dissection, we have to define whether complicated or uncomplicated. In case complicated, we should offer them TWAR. In case of uncomplicated, we have to assess the risk factors, age, and comorbidities. If they are high risk for the TWAR, then should be considered for medical management. If they are low risk candidates, if they are low risk for if they can tolerate the TWAR, then look for the radiological indication for TWAR on CT angio. If feasible, then go for TWAR with the medical management. If not feasible, then go for medical management. Thank you, sir.